It's a late recording, folks. A late night recording. And since I'm old, what I mean by late night, it's that it's 9:30 on a Sunday night. Today is October the 1st. And from the last episode, I'll remind you, it's officially spooky season. So we're continuing the trend of the spooktacular ideas that were coming up for this show, Dumb Test Late. I'm still Kirk. It's still spooky season, October 1st, like I just said. I still got my chatbot AI buddy with me. Like I said, we're continuing the spooky ideas. So this one, I initially titled Homecoming Hell. I don't know, that kind of seems basic, but it's just the premise. Title of the premise I've thought of. But I've had this idea for a while because it was actually a dream. I had like a literal dream. I have very vivid dreams. One of my like reoccurring dreams I have is revisiting the street I grew up on. But there's like, it's kind of like if AI had the image of the street I grew up on and try to like recreate me going back to it. Because every time I have the dream about it, it's something is off. Like there's something familiar. Like I see where the house we grew up on is on the part of the street, but it's something about getting to it. I'm usually walking, but there's like something just off about the street or about getting to it, about everything else that's around it. Like the church that's on the top of the hill that you have to go past to get down to the street, and all the other streets you pass and the shortcuts. It's like everything gets twisted around every time I have this the part of this reoccurring dream. But I'm always like walking towards the house I grew up in, on the street I grew up on. But this one time, the dream was I was on this street. The sun was out, but it was like a hazy day. Like you tell it was during the daytime, but you couldn't like see where the sun was, and it didn't feel very bright. It wasn't like cloudy. It was like I guess you would call overcast. Sorry if my voice got weird there. I was like reaching for the mute or the stop or the cut or the edit button, because a big sneeze was coming on again. But what I was saying, I was walking through, in this dream, my old neighborhood, the old street I grew up on, I should say. But in this specific dream, I realized that, I was talking about it was really overcast, but it was during the day, and I'm walking around, and as I'm looking at the houses, I realized like they're all kind of like falling apart or dilapidated, or some are like burnt. Nothing really looks alive. Everything just looks like dead and just decrepit. Not usually like how my usual dreams, there was a lot of greenery and there's other people and there's cars driving past. It looks like a normal neighborhood. You would, walk down the street. You would see cars parked in, sidewalks and driveways. But I recognize this street. I don't know in the dream if I recognize the house I grew up in. I grew up in, but then I realized I'm not in the neighborhood I grew up in, but the neighborhood I grew up in is kind of an entrance to the Underworld, or the underside, or whatever. What was it from Stranger Things? I don't remember, but it was like reverse. It was like a dark side. It was reversed the way they like showed it. I've only seen season 1 of Stranger Things. Don't get mad. But it was kind of like that, but not exactly. It was just the street I grew up on. But I'm slowly realizing in the dream, this is going to be the idea that I've walked into the underworld without realizing it. And because the next thing in the dream was, I don't remember if this was my house that I grew up in, but I'm in a house that's kind of like the ceiling is half gone and the walls are like burnt through, and I'm sitting in a living room and there's like a TV playing, like one of those old floor model TVs. I'm sitting in like a chair that's, worn out and burnt and cut up and all that stuff. And there's a TV going, and I look over, and there's this kind of, it's hard to describe, but I'll just say a demon, just to like get a name on something. But it's like it was kind of covered in fur. If you go to my website, a quick aside, for this show, Dumb Tesla, and the Instagram, I'll put it on Instagram too. I used one of the AI tools to like create images, and I was trying to like describe it the best way, like specifically, but it's hard. It's like one of the things you can only see in your head. Of course, it's not a real thing, but like it was kind of like this demon, but like a beast kind of, because it had like hair and fur, and it was all black, but it was not like a scary beast. It was like just sitting there watching TV in kind of a depressed way, because that was the overall feeling of the dream. Like, it's not like a shock, like, oh my gosh, I'm in the underworld, or I'm gonna get caught. Like, it was just this slow realization, not of dread, of just depressingly acceptance. That's why, like, the imagery in the dream of me just sitting there and seeing like what I imagined as a demon covered in this weird fur and has horns, and it's just sitting there watching TV, and it doesn't even like, it's not even bothered with me, because I think I'm just a regular person. I'm a mortal that's just walked into the underworld. But it's like this slow realization where you are, and this slow just weight on you that you can't do anything. That was like the overall feeling, the horror of that. Like, I just walked into the underworld, and it's not even like the fear of I'm not supposed to be here. It's like there's nothing I can do about it. I don't know how you would show that, but I guess that sitting there and just slouching down into like this broken, decrepit house in this burnt out living room next to a demon watching something. But then the dream switches, like dreams do. You just end up in a place you don't know how you got there. Because what I think happened in the dream is like someone tells whoever's running the underworld, because in the dream it feels like there's parts of the underworld. It's not like just one place. There's different sections, and I walked in through this certain section. But now that I get caught in like a bad way, like something's gonna happen to me, but they take me over to like, it's kind of like a restaurant or a diner or a club, and whoever is in charge of this certain section of the underworld like wants to talk to me, because in my head, because in the thought process is they want to know how I walked here or how I found it, obviously. So I get escorted to this booth where it looks like a demon, or it just looks like a regular person to me, but it's like the way they like, I don't think they had horns, but like the way their skin looked, or their hair, or something like that, or their eyes, you can tell, and that they're in charge, because it's like one of those scenes where they're sitting in the middle of like the curved booth, and there's a bunch of people around them, and they're just looking at what's going on, and they like escort me to the booth with them, whoever's in charge, and the conversation happens. I don't know what happens, or what it's said, I should say, because this is the last thing I remember from the dream is me being escorted out or away from the conversation that just happened, and seeing like them whisper something to someone else, and then that's all I remember for the dream. So that's like the cusp of my idea for this story, that like you have this reoccurring thought of going back to your, like, you've moved on, it's been years and years, and you visit your old neighborhood, and for some reason you end up in the underworld, or it's just a vision of your old neighborhood or the street you grew up on, but that is the way you enter the underworld. So of course I have to ask my friend chatbot AI to give their version of it. This is what they came up with. My prompt was a movie idea where the entrance to hell is on an underworld copy of the street you grew up on, which is, what I just talked about in the dream. This is what they came up with. The title was Echoes of the Abyss. The log line is, when a troubled young woman returns to her hometown after a family tragedy, She discovers that the entrance to hell is located on an eerie, dark copy of the street she grew up on, and she must confront her past to save her loved ones from eternal damnation. I kind of like that. It's kind of like the thing of you returning to a dark memory or dark things you buried and you have to confront them. It gave me another idea, but let's read this. The synopsis. They talk about a small, seemingly ordinary town. A young woman named Sarah receives the devastating news of her mother's sudden death. That's the reason why she has to go back to her old neighborhood. She returns to her childhood home to deal with painful memories and unresolved family issues. She tries to come to terms with a loss, and then strange things begin to happen. This kind of reminded me of a couple of video games too, maybe like Silent Hill-ish, maybe. She's wandering familiar streets and she stumbles on a distorted, nightmarish version of her old neighborhood. Sinister, otherworldly forces have turned it into an unsettling mirror image of her past, populated by grotesque, demonic inhabitants. Sarah soon realizes that the entrance to hell itself resides on the cursed street. It is a portal that threatens to consume the souls of the town's residents, including her grieving father and childhood friends, dragging them into eternal damnation. She must save her family and her loved ones. She goes on a perilous journey into the dark underworld with a ragtag group of survivors. That's the only thing. I kind of wanted to just be like a solo adventure for a person, and not that something is coming out of the underworld, but they find themselves in the underworld without controlling how they got there, and then meeting kind of a person in charge to get out. The group bonds and are pushed to the limits to navigate through the maze-like streets, seeking answers from a mysterious figure who may hold the keys to the portal, to closing the portal. Echoes of the Abyss is a chilling and psychologically intense thriller that explores themes of guilt, redemption, and resilience of the human spirit. Sarah and her companions must confront their own inner demons as they battle forces of hell in a race against time to save their souls, the souls of their loved ones, before the entrance of hell consumes everything they hold dear. That by itself is probably a good thing to build on, like an action horror movie. But I feel like it's something that was like from the 80s, like an older one, like really like not, I don't want to say low budget, but special effects. Like if you imagine that as 80s movies and how the special effects will look at the time, like the Ghosts and the Demons in the original Ghostbusters movie, it will look like that. But I would turn it around, and it will more be of a short, like psychological walk through the underworld, because what they say, what chatbot came up with when they said Sarah and her companions, I like that it's a female protagonist, and her companions must confront their own inner demons. So that made me think of something else, of like that movie trope where you have to go back into like physically in your past or mentally in like something in the past, and you have to confront something you had hidden or buried or you've grown out of and worked through, and you feel like you've resolved, but it's still in the past, kind of like the original It, when they're grown up, but they have this thing in the past that keeps coming back to haunt them with Pennywise. But in this one, that made me think of Greek mythology, because there's a lot of tales of the underworld, and one of the most famous ones, of course, is Orpheus and Eurydice. It's my favorite one, but I never remember their names. About they fell in love, but Eurydice died, and Orpheus went to the underworld and asked if he can have Eurydice brought back, but he had to walk out of the underworld. They had to walk out kind of together, but Eurydice was behind him. I think it was like a 3-day journey or something like that, but he couldn't look back. That was the only thing. If he looked back, she would be taken back to the underworld. And I think they get to the exit of the underworld, or entrance into the regular world, and he looks back, and she's dragged back to the underworld in front, like right as the end of the journey. But this made me think of like the twist in my story, where I guess I'll use the name in chat bots. They said Sarah. So Sarah, instead of not companions, but to get out of the underworld, she has to walk with her younger self walking behind her, like Orpheus and Eurydice. In this case, she would be Orpheus and her younger self would be Eurydice. That's what's buried in the past in the underworld that she hasn't worked out yet. It'd be symbolism. I don't think it'd be actual like her younger self, but maybe it is. So she has to walk out of the underworld without looking back at her younger self to get out. So that would be kind of the twist, that's what she needs to save, and that's why she's there from the underworld. This part of herself, her younger self, that's hidden memories, hidden dark memories, or something that she wasn't able to deal with as a youth. That's why she's back in where she grew up, and to walk out like Orpheus. But she does make it. She doesn't look back. She walks out and she sees her younger self freed from the underworld. And that's the end for Sarah. That'll be my twist on the chatbot story, in addition to my story. What was my story called? Homecoming Hell. Maybe I'll change that. That's a little too like campy. But yeah, that's my next spooky idea. Like I said before, it is spooky season. It's October 1st. I'm gonna put this out tonight, hopefully. So it'll be on there October 2nd on all the apps and wherever you listen to podcasts. So wherever you're listening to this one, thank you for listening. But that's my idea. I continue with the spooky season. But wherever you are, thanks for listening. I'm still Kirk. I still got the chat bot with me. He's still kicking it. This is still Dumb Test Slate. It's still spooky season until it is the Christmas creep. But hopefully I'll keep my rhythm of putting these out since spooky season is small. You only got a couple more weeks for spooky season. But like I said, thanks for listening. I hope you all hear from me soon. Bye.